went to the wrap party, that this was it for the Andy Griffith
It was
Show.
supposed to be a story of triumph. A famous director, Ron Howard, takes the deeply personal memoir of a self-proclaimed hillbilly and shapes it into a powerful film about beating the odds. It was a story of family, toughness, and the American dream. But in the years since the film's release, that picture of partnership has completely shattered. Now, it's a story of profound disappointment and public criticism. This is how Ron Howard, the man who put J.D. Vance's life on the big screen, became one of his most prominent critics, revealing a sense of betrayal that goes far beyond the Hollywood Hills. Imagine Ron Howard, the Oscar-winning director, sitting down for an interview. He doesn't look angry, just baffled. He'd spent years of his life deep in J.D. Vance's world, carefully telling the story of his journey from Appalachian poverty to Yale Law School for the whole world to see. But the man he now sees on the news, the politician making headlines, feels like a total stranger. "I'm very surprised and disappointed by much of the rhetoric that I'm reading and hearing," Howard would later say, his words chosen carefully, but they still cut deep. So how did it get to this point? How does a relationship built on celebrating a man's life story sour into such public disillusionment? For a lot of people, this wasn't just a political disagreement, it felt like a betrayal of the very story Howard had helped create. To really get the fallout, you have to rewind to when Ron Howard first read Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis. When it came out in 2016, J.D. Vance's book was a sensation nobody saw coming. It was a raw, honest look at his life growing up in a Rust Belt town in Ohio, with family roots deep in the Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky. The book didn't shy away from the tough stuff, a childhood full of instability, poverty, and his mother's ongoing battle with addiction. But it was also a story about survival, held together by the fierce, stubborn love of his grandmother, his mama. In a deeply divided election year, the book gave people something to grab onto. Many saw it as a peek into the lives and frustrations of the white working class, a group that felt left behind by the rest of America. It was debated on cable news and became a go-to text for anyone trying to figure out the cultural shifts happening in the country. The book was a massive success, but it was also controversial right from the start. Plenty of academics and actual residents of Appalachia were angry, arguing that Vance was trying to speak for a whole culture, reinforcing negative stereotypes and passing off his personal story as a universal truth. Critics noted that Vance's story leaned heavily on a "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" message, while mostly ignoring the systemic issues that have crippled the region for generations. But for Ron Howard, a director famous for his focus on the human spirit, the appeal wasn't political. It was personal. He saw a family drama that anyone could connect with. When his company bought the film rights in 2017, and Netflix dropped a cool $45 million to finance it, Howard was crystal clear about his goal. He didn't want to make a political movie. He wanted to tell the story of the incredible women who raised J.D. Vance. During the making of the film, Howard and Vance had a good, professional relationship. They worked together closely. Vance even visited the set and helped the young actor playing him. Glenn Close, who got an Oscar nomination for her incredible transformation into a mama, remembered how generous the family was with their time, sitting with the actors to help them understand their real-life roles. The focus, as Howard has said again and again, was always on the personal journey. "We didn't talk a lot of politics when we were making the movie," Howard explained. "I was interested in his upbringing and that survival tale." At the time, Vance didn't seem to have any political ambitions. Howard recalled that Vance was not involved in politics or claimed to be particularly interested. He was an author and a venture capitalist. The film, in Howard's eyes, was the end of that chapter of his life, a celebration of his journey. No one, especially not the director who told his story, saw the sharp turn that was coming. The J.D. Vance that Ron Howard worked with was the author of a moving, if controversial, memoir. But in the years after the movie came out, a new J.D. Vance started to take shape, one who seemed almost unrecognizable. This wasn't the thoughtful writer, but a political firebrand who would soon be at the center of America's culture wars. Now, Vance's move into politics wasn't a total shock if you'd been paying attention. He'd always been conservative. But what was jarring was his complete flip on Donald Trump. During the 2016 election, Vance was a never-Trump Republican, calling Trump reprehensible and an idiot. The real change started when Vance decided to run for the U.S. Senate in Ohio in 2021. To win a Republican primary in a state that had gone all in on Trump, he had to change his tune. Vance didn't just walk back his old criticisms, he completely embraced the former president. That pivot worked. With Trump's endorsement, Vance won the primary and then the election in 2022. It was during his Senate campaign that the rhetoric Howard found so disappointing really took off. Vance's statements got more and more provocative. He falsely claimed the Biden administration was flooding Ohio with drugs and famously said he didn't care what happened in Ukraine. This was a far cry from the center-right, moderate thinker Howard thought he knew, but the moment that truly defined this new persona came from a 2021 speech. A clip resurfaced after he became Trump's running mate in 2024, and it went viral. In it, Vance claimed the country was being run by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made. He aimed his comments at figures like Vice President Kamala Harris and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The backlash was immediate and fierce, with many calling the remarks misogynistic. In that same speech, Vance also suggested that people with children should have more of a say in our democracy. For Ron Howard, this must have been a shock. The man he'd collaborated with, whose story of resilience he had championed, was now saying things that seemed to fly in the face of that narrative. The man who supposedly wasn't interested in politics was now one of the most talked about and divisive figures in the country, standing next to the very person he once said he couldn't stomach. The turn was complete, and the director who filmed the before was left trying to make sense of the after. As J.D. Vance's political career took off, the gap between the candidate and the main character of Hillbilly Elegy grew wider. And the people who made the film definitely noticed. The first public sign of a problem wasn't a big fight, but a slow, steady stream of dismay, led by the film's director, Ron Howard. At first, Howard's comments were cautious. In 2022, he told The Hollywood Reporter he was taken aback, saying he always knew Vance was conservative but saw him as a center-right, a kind of a moderate thinker. But as Vance's profile exploded, especially after being picked as Trump's running mate, Howard's tone sharpened from surprise to clear disappointment. Based on the conversations that we had during that time, I just have to say I'm very surprised and disappointed by much of the rhetoric that I'm reading and hearing, he told one outlet. To another, he added, I have been surprised and concerned by a lot of the rhetoric coming out of that campaign. He acknowledged that people change, but the message was obvious. This wasn't the guy he thought he knew, the contrast was impossible to miss. You had clips of Howard and Vance from 2020, talking friendly about family and healing, right next to Vance's new, aggressive political soundbites. Howard also made his own politics perfectly clear, stating, "There's no version of me voting for Donald Trump to be president again, whoever the vice president was." His message shifted to a call to action. Listen to what the candidates are saying today, that's what's really relevant. It's who they are today. It wasn't just Howard. Glenn Close, whose amazing performance as Vance's Mama earned her an Oscar nomination, also expressed her confusion. In a January 2025 appearance on The View, she remembered Vance visiting the set and helping the cast. When co-host Joy Behar noted that Vance had a whole different personality in those days, Close simply replied, "I don't know what happened." She guessed that the pull of power might be the reason, adding, "Power is probably the biggest aphrodisiac." Close had also taken a swipe at Vance's infamous, childless cat ladies comment. On Instagram, she posted a picture of herself with her cat, Eve, writing, "Eve would have left a bleeding mouse head in the bed of anyone who criticized any kind of lady with a cat." It was a clever jab that used the spirit of the character she played to critique the real-life man. Others in Hollywood spoke out, but the comments from Close and Howard hit differently. They had put their time and talent into telling Vance's story. Now, they were publicly washing their hands of the man he had become. The alliance was over, replaced by a deep and very public sense of regret. So, what do you think? Can you separate the art from the person? Is this a story about political growth or a betrayal of where you came from? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you found this story interesting, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next video. This public fallout between Ron Howard and J.D. Vance is more than just Hollywood drama. It touches on some big questions about the messy intersection of art and politics, and the complicated legacy of hillbilly elegy. First off, it shows the risk Hollywood takes when telling stories about real people, especially political ones. Howard wanted to make an apolitical film about a family's struggle. But the book was already political the second it hit shelves. By making the movie, Howard stepped right into a cultural minefield. The film was hit with criticism from the get-go. The AV Club called it bootstrapping poverty porn, and a Forbes critic said it plays like privileged Hollywood outsiders looking in with pity. The movie was accused of leaning into the very stereotypes many in Appalachia have been fighting for decades. Vance's political career then retroactively made the film even more complicated. For those who already disliked the movie, his transformation was proof. It seemed to show that the story wasn't really an honest look at a culture, but a platform for a conservative agenda dressed up as a universal tale. Some even accused Howard of unleashing a polarizing figure. Howard pushed back, saying the film was about a specific time in Vance's life, long before his political career really started. "It's not really about a movie made 5 or 6 years ago," he said, arguing that voters need to focus on who these candidates are today. This all leads to the question of artistic responsibility. Do a director and actors who tell a person's story have any responsibility for who that person becomes? For Howard and Close, it seems to be an issue of authenticity. They felt like they signed up to tell one story, only to watch its hero change into someone pushing a completely different, more divisive message. Their public disappointment is their way of trying to set the record straight, to say, this isn't the story we meant to tell. Ultimately, this whole saga says a lot about political identity in America today. Vance's journey from a never Trump critic to a MAGA loyalist is a path others have walked, but his is uniquely preserved in the amber of a major Hollywood film. The movie freezes him in time as a thoughtful survivor, a jarring contrast to the aggressive politician he is now. It makes you ask, which one is the real J.D. Vance? Could both be true? As Ron Howard himself said, people do change, and I assume that's the case. It's a simple statement, but it gets to the heart of it. The falling out between Howard and Vance is a powerful, public drama about how people and politics can transform, and the disillusionment of those who are left behind, holding on to a version of a person that might not exist anymore. The journey from a celebrated Hollywood partnership to a public falling out is a drama worthy of a Ron Howard movie. It started with a shared goal, to tell a powerful American story about bouncing back from hardship. Howard saw a universal tale of survival in J.D. Vance's memoir, one he thought could build bridges. He put his heart into celebrating a man who had pulled himself out of poverty and trauma, but people and their stories don't stand still. The J.D. Vance who stepped onto the political stage became someone the director who documented his life just couldn't recognize. The thoughtful author was gone, replaced by a combative politician. The story of unity was swapped for the language of division. What was left was a deep and public disappointment, a sense that the very subject of the story had let the storyteller down. The title, Ron Howard Utterly Despised Him, is, of course, a bit of dramatic flair. There's no proof of a petty feud. What exists is something more thoughtful, a profound sadness. It's the disappointment of a storyteller who feels that the soul of his story has been betrayed. Howard's repeated statements about being surprised and disappointed aren't just political jabs, they are the words of an artist wrestling with the legacy of his own work. This whole affair leaves us with some tough questions. What happens when the hero of the story becomes someone you can no longer cheer for? And who really gets to write the final chapter? In the case of Ron Howard and J.D. Vance, that story is still being written, a compelling drama playing out for the entire country to see, far away from any movie set.